There are so many people who are good with money, but then they kind of just follow along in the standard American way of living, which is pretty bad for you. And that starts to catch up with you the older you get. So I would encourage you to find a fun and sustainable way to become a health nut. And I think everybody should be in the top 1% of their peer group for healthy habits, which usually results in healthy results as well. I was trying to get specific on all the categories of expenses that a typical middle class family has, because the problem I was finding is why does everybody have a pretty low savings rate? Why does everybody paycheck to paycheck regardless of their income? And the reason is because their day-to-day spending is just kind of thoughtless. They're like, well, I get my groceries the way I do it, and I have a car, and I need my car, and my car has certain expenses with it. And they're not digging into enough detail to get these costs down. I'm so business-oriented too, and it's also why I'm so anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto, is because that's not a business, right? Bitcoin is a belief system, and it's not actually producing anything. And I would much rather own a farm or a rental apartment than a piece of algorithm and data, which is like a Bitcoin, because it's not actually doing anything, and it depends on other people buying it for me at a higher price. So that's why I'm so kind of if you read Warren Buffett's belief systems, it's pretty much exactly how I feel.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
All right. Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm here today with Jackie Cummins-Koski, and we have a very special guest for you today. All the way back from Phoenix, Arizona, just back home is Pete Adeney. We'd like to welcome Pete to the show, right, Jackie?
Yeah, we are excited to have Pete today, and I am definitely looking forward to this conversation. Over the years, I've seen the evolution of Mr. Money Mustache, and it's been pretty interesting to me. So this will be a great conversation.
He really doesn't need any introduction because in the FI world, he's known as Mr. Money Mustache. He retired, and I didn't know this, in 2005 at age 30. He published his first blog in 2021. When people discover FI, they go down the rabbit hole of information overload, drinking water from the fire hose. Invariably, the journey starts with blogs like Pete's. One cannot help but read many of his iconic articles and be inspired and informed on the mindset, mechanics, challenges and joys of life of financial freedom and lifestyle, which is a big topic for him. His engaging, humble, and self-deprecating humor and profound insights have helped countless people on their journey to FI. We late starters are honored to have him with us on Catching Up to FI. Pete, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Wow, I didn't know you were going to have this nice poetic start of a book intro for me, but thank you. It's quite an honor. And also, Jackie, congratulations on taking over the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Look, we're not too shabby around here, are we?
Yeah, very pro. Not used to that.
Well, our audience is late starters, and they obviously know you. All of them seem to have gone down the rabbit hole and found you, as you and Simple Path to Wealth just keep coming up over and over again. You didn't start Mr. Money Mustache until 6 years into retirement. What were the origins of that? How did this get started? Was it just I'm just going to do this for myself, and you had no idea it would turn into what it did?
Well, that was the origin of the retirement. Basically, I wanted to be retired in order to start family. And now we have that 18-year-old, almost adult, because retirement was that long ago. The blogging was totally separate. I did that out of frustration because I thought that this stuff that I was doing was just obvious, right? If you make more than, let's say, $20,000, then of course, everything above that is going to be surplus. So should you save that? Or should you just waste it on more cars and stuff? So I did that. Just coming up as a less wealthy, my own upbringing was less wealthy. So I didn't even know how to spend a lot of money. So I thought I was doing great already. And then the excess money just got saved, eventually got invested. And when it became enough to cover our expenses forever, then I declared retirement. And it was only 6 years after that I saw all the friends still working, my colleagues, sometimes even paycheck to paycheck on these big engineering salaries. And that's what led me to realize, hey, I should try sharing this information in case anyone else finds it useful.
Well, it rapidly became an iconic blog. And in our space, you're famous. I mean, everybody feels that they know you because you've been so personal in your blog. Has the fame and the iconic nature of your blog changed your life at all?
No, thankfully. The only thing that changes life is it's allowed me to gather more people in my real life. Like, for example, co-starting this co-working space with Carl, Mr. 1500, and Mindy and another friend. So it allows us to have more friends in real life. That's the only thing that's really genuinely different and better, of course. It turns out being internet famous doesn't really mean anything. It just means that more numbers appear on the stats of your website or more comments appear on your Instagram account or whatever, but there's no real impact in real life because internet famous is so different than real famous, like an actor or a pop star or something where people recognize you in real life. I'm also thankful that that doesn't happen because from the very small experience of like being well known at a blogger conference or something, it's actually not very fun because people are just coming up and kind of interrupting your regular life and you're trying to have dinner with your friends and like, can we take some selfies with you? So I can only imagine how that would not be fun for an actual celebrity. So I'm lucky that I'm just in this nerdy niche of personal finance. But yeah, it's enough connection that you can meet genuine friends that you want to spend the real life with.
Yeah, and Pete, you were at Economy, I think, last year. And I remember I did go to your breakout that you did here in Cincinnati. And I didn't get a chance to meet you because you draw a crowd. So I hate that I missed you then. So I kind of get what you're saying. But did you say your son was 18?
Yeah, turned 18 a couple months ago.
I did not know he was already 18. I have a 20-something-year-old now, but they grow really fast. So almost the entire time you were writing the blog, you had your son during that time.
Yeah, he was already.
Yeah, I bet he learned a lot during that time.
Sort of. Whether I had the blog or not, I probably would have the same upbringing, other than the fact that he knows that I have this funny internet hobby. But yeah, we grew up with like a pretty low-key, nature-based, not super consumery childhood for him. And it was still pretty luxurious because it's the US and his mom and I had great salaries back when we were working and then good savings to live off of. And yeah, it's totally fine.
Well, how is retirement 19 years later? I mean, I'm 58. I'm still a working stiff. I'm in the chair. I didn't get it right. I woke up late at 50, and you got it completely right. Retired at 30, and you've been retired almost as long as I've been working. So you got to tell me, what was it like to start retirement that early, and how does it feel now, 18 years later?
It was always great. I've never had any problem with not having that particular job because I really enjoyed my job. I was a tech worker, like a software engineer. The only reason I needed to quit is because I felt it was sucking up all my time. I always felt like the weekends were the fun times because I was engaged with a lot of stuff that I wanted to do. And then even though the job was good, it was always like, oh, this job is taking all this valuable time. And I'd be walking, our building was in Boulder, Colorado, with these beautiful like hallway of glass. Every time you walk from one meeting room to another, or like the laboratories, you're walking, looking over this entire like mountain range and the city below you. And I was like, why am I in here and not out there? So that was the real motivation, is just the free time. And I just try to use my free time for things that I'm interested in. So I'm still always kind of working on something. It's just that it doesn't have to make money now. And yeah, I'm just very precious about not wanting to waste my time. And I know we only live a certain number of years. So far, so good.
Wow, it's incredible. You may not like the word retirement, but you wrote an article called, and this is one that everybody reads, The Shockingly Simple Math of Early Retirement. I'm sure you've talked about it ad nauseum, but it's such a pivotal article, and it was so crucial to me because it says, this is how long my journey is going to be if I do this. How did you come up with this idea, and how did it start, and how did you figure this out, that it's just a matter of time and savings rate, and you can control your life and control your time if you pay attention to it?
I mean, that's just basic math, right? It's just it seems obvious that the more money you save, the faster you save, the faster you're going to have a lot of money, right? And that's what you need to retire. But I was just always trying to find simpler ways to express it. And then I remember my article isn't really particularly groundbreaking because I remember Jacob Frisker had a similar thing in his book called Early Retirement Extreme. And I think it might have even had similar things way back in Your Money or Your Life, which is just a graph that says the same idea, like savings rate versus how long you have to work. So the only good thing about my article is just it made it simple, like the language in there, like there's no math, it's just trying to beat people over the head with these very simple concepts, because it is shockingly simple. And I'm glad it caught on. I'm not like a mathematical innovator for coming up with that. I just made it into a really pretty chart with a good font and good colors. And that's really what it takes to make change, actually. Because like all the answers to living a good life in all dimensions are already out there. And one of the main reasons most people lead a pretty bad life, pretty inefficient life, is just they haven't learned, and that's because it's hard to learn. So my job with this blog is mainly just to take really obvious stuff and make it feel as obvious as it is, so that people can benefit from learning, even if they don't have a lot of time to commit to reading.
Yeah, and Pete, I think the simplicity part is a really big deal because the financial industry doesn't make these things easy. So since the beginning of time, I don't know, 50 years ago, the financial planning industry hasn't really come up with a simple way when people ask that question, how much do I need to retire? They'll start to run charts and graphs and just make it so complex. And I think that's something that attracted me to the FIRE community, and this particular article that you wrote especially, is the simplicity. That was the first time it ever made sense. And I was saying the same thing as you. It's just math, and it shouldn't have been that difficult, but it made it click for me. And simplicity, there's just so much beauty there. And you put it together the way that obviously millions and millions of people found very simplistic, where finally it's getting through. So,
I mean,
Well, hey, thanks.
well, the numbers itself are really impressive. People talk about, when you start your career, save 10%. But if you look at it, how long you're going to work, that's like 40 years, maybe even longer. And for me, when I caught up late, it's like, okay, you got to save 40 or 50%, and your journey's, depending on market, 12 to 15 years. And we want people to wake up to this fact early on. I mean, I've said for physicians especially, where burnout's so high, work 20 for the money and the rest for joy. In 5 years, pay off your debt. And then in 15 years, save half your income, live on one income, and you're free. And then you can do medicine. It's better for healthcare, for physicians to be financially free. I think they deliver better healthcare when they're not worried about the massive student loan debt burden or the high lifestyle that a lot of physicians lead. It's just so telling that work 20 for the money and the rest for joy. And your graph says exactly why that works.
Yeah, I mean, 20 is an awfully long time to have any kind of US doctor salary. I'm still glad there's a slogan like that. But yeah, physicians and maybe some other high income professionals are kind of notorious for being bad with money, even though they're good with learning a lot of stuff about the human body, right? I mean, the whole fact that doctors think they have a lot of student loans is kind of hilarious, because 1 year of your salary would pay it off as soon as you get to a full-time out of your residency. So $250,000, even though it's like $500,000, that's 2 years of just like live like a normal person instead of a doctor. And then you put the rest of that money into the loans and then you're gone. So I really am glad that there are people in medicine who are reading FIRE blogs, because like you said, they're going to lower their stress, they're going to be able to do more medicine and less billing. And I kind of like how the direct primary care movement has come out of this a little bit too, where doctors are trying to create a more of a lifestyle business where they're connected to their patients instead of trying to run a huge office with insurance companies fighting and a lot of complexity.
Yeah, Pete, can you talk a little bit more about the direct primary care? Because I've heard you mention that before. For somebody that hasn't heard of that, tell us how you're using that.
Yeah, well, it's just a subscription-based doctor. Sometimes people call it concierge medicine, which is like a little bit pretentious sounding. But all it really is you pay a flat fee. For me, it's $107 a month. And in exchange for that, I just have access to a medical office. It's right here in my town. It has a few primary doctors now that work there, as well as like nurse practitioners and other people. So it's very efficiently run. And if I don't do anything, if I don't need any care, which is most months, then I still pay, which is why they're able to offer this service so cheaply. And then when I do need something, I get really good service with no copay, right? So for example, last fall, I cut my toe pretty severely on a construction site. And it was such a relief that I didn't have to go into an emergency room and have somebody check it out. I've just like text messaged my medical office and they said, yeah, just come on to the office and we'll take a look. Turned out to be a lot less bad than it looked. So the guy just gave me some antibiotics and like cleaned up the wound a little bit. But that's an example. And there was no bill because I'd already been paying my subscription for that.
Did they get you in pretty quick?
Oh yeah. Like when you need the care, you typically get it the same day.
Nice.
Because they have it all set up. Like they have a certain number of subscribers. They don't go over what they can handle. And everything works out well. Once you get those bigger numbers too, it becomes pretty predictable how many times people are going to come into the office versus how many doctors you have. So everybody ends up getting great service, and yet the doctors don't have to work too hard, and they get a nice salary, and their office is funded without a bunch of churn through the medical bills and stuff.
Oh, I love that. So no insurance involvement at all.
Right.
Awesome.
And then this is separate. You can still have a catastrophic plan that would cover like a hospitalization, things that your doctor can't handle.
Right.
So the direct primary care, they typically cover all your normal stuff, like stitches even is included, and all the blood tests and diagnosis and coaching. But if I get something that needs just surgery, they don't have that in their office. And they would just refer me to a local hospital or something, and I would have to pay that bill on my own.
Gotcha.
They do that. They have a connection where they say our clients will come to you, and the hospital kind of promises to charge a reasonable cash pay rate instead of the inflated starter opening bid for the insurance company. But some people still can't afford that. So there's still catastrophic insurance, which you can get through the normal, what is it called? The
Affordable Care Act, the healthcare.gov. Yeah. Okay. To me, that's a great combination there. So.
Yeah, it is. So I got one of these catastrophic.
Is that how you manage your healthcare? Because people talk about how do we manage healthcare in early retirement? How have you really done that? Other than the direct primary care, what has been your way of ensuring against the issues that early retirees really worry about because they've got a long glide path to Medicare? How have you managed it so you can tell our folks how to do it?
Yeah, that's why I wrote an article about this. And if you look up 2 years without health insurance and now what I'm doing now, or you can just look up Mr. Money Mustache direct primary care. Just Google for that and you'll get this article I wrote. So if you get Affordable Care Act insurance, that's full insurance and it's not as expensive as most people think. Everybody thinks your insurance is going to be like $1,000 a month per person or something like that. And therefore I have to stay employed in order to keep this insurance that I need so much. But it's not really like that. It's like more in the hundreds per month range. And it goes up with your age, and then there's also health share things, which were in the past only religion-based, and now there's secular ones. So I'm subscribed to one that's called Sedera. And I mainly did that just because I want people to see the alternatives. And I've tried a bunch of stuff. The thing for me, though, I'm not a good test case because I've never had any medical needs. I've just been lucky. I've never had to go to a hospital or a doctor for anything other than strep throat once or something like that. So there's other people who deal with more complex medical needs, and their blogs or podcasts or websites, or YouTubes would probably be better than me. I'm just like an example of what to do if you are lucky enough to have a pretty average, healthy situation. And the other thing is the more you save up, like the bigger your retirement stash is, the more you can afford to self-insure. And that's, if you live conservatively and continue to do so, after you retire, you're probably going to keep saving up more and more and more. And then the costs of a medical procedure become less and less of a worry. I mean, if you think about it, Bill Gates doesn't need medical insurance, right? Like no matter what happens to him, it's going to be a negative, like a negligible thing for him to pay the bill. And for fire people, you might start out where that's not the case, but you gradually move towards that if you're doing a good job managing your money, because people do tend to get wealthier even after retirement. And that's because they've baked a lot of safety into the retirement plan. So you get to worry less and less. And that's really what my whole thing is all about. It's not worrying so much.
I would agree with that, Pete. My net worth has gone up. I've been retired I'm going on my 5th year, so I'm not quite up with you yet. But yeah, it kind of surprised me that it has gone up because I've started to draw down a little bit here and there. And 5 years later, my net worth has gone up. So I don't worry quite as much. And that's kind of reassuring to me. So to your point, yeah, I've experienced the same thing.
Well, that brings up actually another point, because I don't know that I've heard about what you invested in to get financially independent. And have you had to draw down, or does your side hustle take care of your average expenses?
It's been different throughout the retirement. So when I first retired, I started a really foolish house building company that lost a bunch of money. It was just before the housing crisis. So that was an example where I did draw down. I had to sell shares of my index funds in order to cover living expenses and the losses through this company. And then things went better in the later years after the first few years. And then I had rental houses for a while that were paying the bills. But the real answer is, I think The Simple Path to Wealth, Jim Collins' book, is really the best answer for most retirees, which is you could pretty much buy one exchange traded index fund, which is VTI, and that would already be great because you're holding the whole US index. You'll also get some dividend. It's super stable because it's thousands of companies that you're owning slices of. And that's what my savings are mostly in now. I have pretty much all US and international index funds held just between like a Vanguard account and a Betterment account. But if you look inside, they're both kind of holding the same things. And a lot of that is just VTI. And there's VXUS, which is basically the rest of the world in another index fund. And very stable, grows along with the world economy. And then you just don't have to worry about it. You don't think about it.
Do you own bonds or do you have a high risk tolerance?
Oh yeah, not really much bonds. I think when you look at the overall performance, the higher the stock allocation is, the better you do over time. And I'm only interested in the long run. So yeah, you look at more fluctuation if you have an almost all stock portfolio, but it comes back really quickly. So unless you look at the stock market every day and say, oh no, I lost 3% of my savings, which is a foolish way to think about your money. And you can have a higher percentage. And because you're withdrawing, like even if you're fully retired and let's say you're in your 60s and 70s, you're still just taking a tiny, tiny amount out of your portfolio each year. So the fluctuations don't really affect you as much. So yeah, pretty low on the bonds. They're probably better now with interest rates being higher than they were a few years ago, but I still, I guess you could say I have a high fluctuation tolerance. I don't really call that risk, but I have a high tolerance for fluctuating stock prices.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have that. And our late starter audience would be interested. We know there's no magic button, but do you have any specific advice for portfolio construction for, say, somebody that started in their 40s or at 50?
If you want to do it yourself, you probably want to like read a book on it or something, but you can also get a target date retirement fund, which all that really means is that you have a higher percentage of bonds as you get closer to your official retirement date. Vanguard has a bunch of these. Betterment has different modes for that too, if you want them to do that. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't think about portfolio too much because if you really understand what the stock market is, you can have it all VTI. That's a portfolio. Like VTI is one fund, but it's also a portfolio. So I really don't get too complicated with like, especially not with the whole permanent portfolio stuff. If you heard of that, some people think you hold some gold in there as well and fixed income things. I'm much more of a pure stocks person. And I just prefer, maybe it's because I'm so business oriented too. And it's also why I'm so anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto, is because that's not a business, right? Like Bitcoin is a belief system and it's not actually producing anything. And I would much rather own like a farm or a rental apartment than a piece of algorithm and data, which is like a Bitcoin, because it's not actually doing anything and it depends on other people buying for me at a higher price. So that's why I'm kind of like, if you read Warren Buffett's belief systems, it's pretty much exactly how I feel. Just read all of his annual letters to shareholders and then you'll see why I'm so pro stock.
Yeah, and you can't argue with Warren Buffett. And also, Pete, you wrote the foreword to J.L. Collins' book, Simple Path to Wealth, right? And that pretty much has the same philosophy about back to the keep it simple. He talks about VTSAX, but that's just the mutual fund version of VTI. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it could be just that simple.
Yeah, right. The more complex you make it, the less well you do usually, and you also just think about it and worry about it more. And I was talking with somebody from my headquarters co-working space yesterday, and this person is into all the crypto stuff and ETFs and airdrops and trading stuff back and forth and individual stock ownership. And it just sounded like I was open to listening, but the conversation led me back to where I already was, which is the more you understand the fundamentals of what a stock really is, the less you want to invest in all this alternative stuff. And people are just thinking of it as a gambling and speculative way. Like, oh, I'm going to wait till it goes down to buy it. Then I'm going to trade it off for something else when it goes higher. Like, those are all speculative and gambling ways to think about asset ownership. And I really discourage that.
Yeah, and I agree with you on Bitcoin. I'm completely on board because it's really the greater fool theory where there's no cash flow and no dividends. And it's all, I'm going to buy it and I expect that somebody's going to buy it or I'll be able to sell it at a higher rate. And there's just no guarantees. And it's so volatile that I don't have any Bitcoin in my portfolio. I have no FOMO in that regard. And I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And so I've written about this before, and the people who like Bitcoin write me, they're like, oh, you just don't understand. Like, I thought you were smarter than that. And then if it goes up, they're like, look how much money you lost your readers because Bitcoin's higher now than when you wrote that article. Nobody has provided an actual real justification for why is it good to speculate on this. And I've read all the stories. Like, the thing about Bitcoin is there's all this lore that comes with it. Like, the government is corrupt and the Federal Reserve Bank is just printing toilet paper and everything's going to be inflation and destroyed without this being saved by this coin. But it's like, without that lore, which is really, really like a religion, it all falls apart. So the people who really believe in Bitcoin, they're either totally into gambling or they totally believe this mythical belief system. But zero people have actually ever explained it. And I've read so much and watched so many YouTube videos to see if there's anything behind like the curtains or the emperor's new clothes. And there's just nothing there. Bitcoin is really just a crazy belief system. It blows my mind that it keeps going. But I can't predict its collapse, because if people keep believing it, they're going to keep buying it from each other. So, I can't predict the behavior of people like that.
Well, I think the worst part is that they have an army of scammers that seem to be connected with that industry, and that doesn't help anything either. So, Pete, I wanted to ask you about, so I think it was 2022 where you were part of the Netflix documentary, Get Smart with Money. I really love that. So I'm curious, why did you say yes to that project, and what was your experience like?
Yeah, I wrote an article about that. I think I called it Get Smart with Money Day, in case anyone's really curious. But the reason was really just because I thought it would be a good way to get the word out of like this, in the concepts I'm trying to spread. It would be better to spend that effort with these super talented filmmakers, and it's going to go to the Netflix audience, than spending the same number of hours of me just typing stuff into the computer again. So very like kind of self-interested in that way. Like, I was like, hey, if you're going to put a certain amount of hour into Mr. Money Mustache stuff, why not work with the Netflix production? And then, to be honest, like, the experience of doing it, I never find camera work to be fun, especially for anything that's scripted. Where, like, the Netflix movie was not scripted, but it was a little bit, like you had to repeat yourself sometimes if they didn't catch your lines. And to me, that feels very unnatural. It was like a pretty well-produced show. So they have like a million cameras and lights all around you. And they're like, okay, now Pete, talk to John and Kim. Those are the names of my coaching clients. Like, talk to them about the retirement account and the fees they're paying. So then we have to have a sort of natural, but sort of artificial conversation about something. And to me, that's not me. I just like stuff to be natural and real. So it was hard, but I did it. I'm happy with how the movie came out, and it definitely reached a lot of people. Yeah. So that's a huge win. And it was great because it wasn't just me. It was Paula and Tiffany Rossman.
Yeah, if anyone hasn't seen the documentary on Netflix, we'll link to it, but it's Get Smart with Money. And it was wonderful. I love watching it. And I'm sure there's people that may not have seen it yet, but it's definitely worth the watch. I loved it. And I was just curious about kind of how you felt behind the scenes. I always love the behind the scenes. So thank you.
Yeah, the thing I liked is that the people I was able to pick as my clients, they were really, really nice, genuine people and a young family. And they were exactly who I like to try to coach, which is high income, high spending people who could be really getting ahead quickly, but aren't just because they're spending so much. And I feel like John and Kim really made a lot of changes during that year. We worked together with the cameras there occasionally, and they have much better life because of it. And I wanted that to be an example to other people who are in that situation, because it's just kind of my target market is like your engineers and doctors and other high earners, and trying to get them to not be so consumption oriented.
Yeah. So you got to pick the client.
Yeah, it was super fun. It was kind of like a casting call where we put out what we're offering, like the coaches and I, like Paula had her video, I had my video. And then people submitted just turned on their webcam or whatever and said, hi, like we're these two people, we live in Denver and this is our life situation. And this is why we think we would be good coaching clients. And it was kind of heartbreaking, almost like that show, The Bachelor, where I was like, oh, I really want to work with these people, but then you're only allowed to pick one. And there were like 6 for me to choose from. And I wanted to have them all as clients. It was unpaid, but they were still kind of clients. And anyway, we ended up picking John and Kim they were just really, really perfect and very camera friendly, to be honest, too, because they're good looking people and they have these super cute little kids. So everyone's going to want to watch them on the Netflix movie. So
yeah, well, don't sell yourself, but it really did come out great. I couldn't wait to watch it and I thought it was awesome. Bill, you got to watch it, right? Did you watch it yet?
I haven't yet, and I will. The thing that's interesting to me is a lot of FI people are natural introverts. It seems to be part of the personality of the FI folks. And you're a very humble, reserved, private person. I applaud you for overcoming that and becoming a film star, so to speak. You've been in other films as well, and I can't imagine doing that. Although we need a late starter out there that sort of kicks ass and tells other late starters that they can do it.
Bill, that's calling your name. Your name.
Right. Yeah.
We could do another movie where you're my coach and you help us tweak what we've already done. We've gone from an 8% savings rate to 40 to 50. So we've done a good job following I just wish I'd done it earlier, but that's what every lay starter says. They wish I'd done it earlier and just start now and work hard and that brings up actually another article. I love the one where you said how to go from middle class to kick ass. And this is one that we want our audience to read because it's perfect for late starters. You talk about streamlining your expenses. Can you address that article a little bit and tell folks what you were trying to reach and what you were trying to do with that article? Because the late starters need to read this one.
Right. That one's from quite a while ago, so I don't have it in front of me, but I just remember I was trying to get specific on all the categories of expenses that a typical middle class family has, because the problem I was finding is like, why does everybody have a pretty low savings rate? And why is everybody paycheck to paycheck, regardless of their income? And the reason is because their day-to-day spending is just kind of thoughtless. They're like, well, I get my groceries the way I do it, and I have a car, and I need my car, and my car has certain expenses with it. And they're not digging into enough detail to get these costs down. So I wanted to be more specific of like the average US family, for example, if they're buying a new car, it's really a $48,000 pickup truck or a really big SUV. And they just do that because that's what everyone else on their street, because they're probably in a nice neighborhood. Everyone does that. Everyone gets a loan for it. And I wanted to like challenge these default assumptions and say, like, guess what? You could do it another way. You can have a car for $17,000, which is still a lot, but it's 3 times less than the average. And then this is the difference it makes every 10 years for making these decisions. And like groceries, I actually just got back from the grocery store before like tuning to podcast here. And I just shop at like Sam's and Costco. And that's just the habit I'm in. It's the closest grocery store. And I just know where to get all my stuff. I still buy like the best quality, healthy food, but it saves me probably like $3,000 a year just by not going to the regular Kroger grocery store that's across the street from there, or the Whole Foods. And I use Whole Foods when I want like the gourmet, particular small things like certain hot sauce or whatever. But that's my habit, right? Like I have a habit of doing things a certain way. And then now that that's locked in, my expenses are still only like $20,000 to $30,000 a year when they could be double that or triple that. And my life would really look the same too. So that's what that article was about. It's like challenge assumptions, lock in new ones that just happen to be more efficient. And then suddenly you got a huge surplus.
Well, I'm curious, Pete, most of the time that you were retired, you had your son. And how does a kid change your finances? We have a lot of people in our community that do have kids, and sometimes that's part of the reason why they feel like they gotten a late start. How did that change for you from the time you were single, before you retired and all that, but then you retired even with a kid and it was okay? So how does that change the economics and the whole approach to FIRE?
I love that question because kids are a big chaotic element in your life, and everybody thinks they're expensive, which means it's a ripe ground for optimizing, right? And trying to find a smarter way to do it. It's more joyful as well. So first of all, the interesting thing is when you look at a chart of like how much does it cost to raise a child, it's like depends on the income. So people with low incomes, it costs very little to raise a child. People with high incomes, like, oh yeah, it's $30,000 per year per child for these extra expenses. So that's like a little red flag right there, or a little clue. I just found it cost just about nothing to raise our child because he had a lot of needs for attention and didn't like the kind of stuff that adults like to do. So because of that, we did a lot less travel and restaurants once he was born, and just hung out and did natural stuff instead. So like going for walks and playing in the creek, and still did a reasonable amount of travel. And I don't want people to think it's like this really like living in a tent lifestyle, but I really think it's just, the number of activities and prestigious stuff you sign your kids up for, that scales up the cost, especially if you're signing them up for things that require a lot of driving, because sometimes people will burn through entire multiple cars. If you think about the lifespan of your kids, you just drive, and then that car is destroyed from high miles and keep going. So keep it local and natural. And the other thing is childcare is sometimes the very highest expense for a child. So if you can have the kid at home more and have less childcare, which in other words, cut your other expenses so much that you don't need a second income, and then one parent can stay home with the child, then suddenly there's another $2,000 a month that comes back to you. So you're really kind of saving double by getting that other set of expenses optimized. Yeah, so we had pretty minimal childcare expenses, put him in daycare, or like a preschool, I guess you call it, for a little bit, just because he's an only child and we wanted him to have more socializing before he started kindergarten. And then we went to a public school that was a really, really nice one right in the neighborhood, which we were able to walk to. And so there was never any driving to kids around, even to school situation. And because of that, he just grew up. We never had a shortage for anything, but it just didn't cost very much. And then I was hoping my son would go to college, and I had obviously the money set aside for that. But I just chosen a different path. He's too independent for that, like more entrepreneurial or oriented. So there's not going to be any money spent on college tuition, but even that is not all that expensive relative to the type of income and savings you can have as a fire person, especially if you encourage your kid to go to school in state, if that's what it takes for your budget. Many people assume you can just go to any school and you shouldn't consider the cost. And I fight back against that. You should think about what your family can afford, and don't just pretend that all education is worth it regardless of the price.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I have a daughter that's 20 something. And definitely there's like so many options for going to school, and what we can contribute is not just monetary. Of course, it doesn't surprise me that your son wants to be an entrepreneur and he's very independent. Look who his dad is. But that means so much more to him. And that was a route that you pointed that maybe not directly, but indirectly, you probably showed that, hey, this is a great life. And I'm sure he took some of that away, and he's going to be amazing at whatever he does, whether he goes to college or does whatever he does. So we can't wait to see what he ends up doing, but it's kind of neat to watch that as a parent. So.
Yeah.
And what isn't all unicorns and rainbows for you? Because, and this happens a lot to our late starter audience, where the financial shock of divorce causes the late start and regrouping. Your divorce did not go that way, though. And you wrote an article on this, and I was fascinated by how amicable and low cost it was. Can you take us through that and how you did it?
Yeah. And so that's one of the biggest pieces of good luck, is like, the person I married was wonderful to be married to, and we were together for over 20 years before we eventually split up. And she's also a wonderful person to be an ex-husband to, because we're still great friends and collaborators and on the same team and raising the child. He's now almost done. So the better your relationship, the better separation is going to go, because nobody wants to fight the other person. But we found that being financially independent, and so not worry about money, that really lowered the stress level of the separation. Because a lot of times when people split, if they feel a shortage, then they're going to want to fight, like, no, I need more of our share. No, I need more. And then since they're both clinging to a feeling of shortage, they're going to strike and lash out at each other because they want more. And I try to encourage people, like, first of all, it's never worth being mean to somebody that you have to, especially if you're still raising a child with them. Like, it's better to lose money than lose relationship in that situation. So even if it feels unfair, then suck it up and just earn more money afterwards. But secondly, yeah, the more plentiful the money is. And if you led a frugal, non-consumerist lifestyle up until the time you need to separate, then it's going to make the whole process easier. So we just split up our savings. She kept the house. I bought a new one, which I'm in now. And then we were both still retired afterwards. Like we still had enough because our expenses dropped as well, right? Like it's true that we had a house, like I had to get another house, but the rest of your expenses cut in half when you separate a couple. So you don't need as much to remain financially independent. So yeah, I've kind of become an accidental like men's divorce counselor after that. Cause like sometimes blog readers, especially if they live nearby, they'll say, hey man, I think I might be headed for a divorce. Can we talk it through? Like I'm really scared and I'm not sure if I'm going to be, if my family's going to be hurt, my job as a dad. So we'll like go for a walk and walk around the trails for a couple hours and talk through all this stuff. And then, cause someone did that for me when I was going through the divorce, and it was really, really helpful to remind them like, hey, it doesn't have to be scary. And the outcome is actually a good thing. I mean, for people who split up, that was the right choice. So you're doing a hard process to get through to the right choice. So there's no reason to be ashamed or afraid of that. It's actually something to be proud of getting through and accomplishing, especially if you come through it with your ethics intact and you weren't a mean person in the process.
You actually filled out the paperwork yourselves. And can you tell our audience how much it costs to get divorced?
Well, this is in Colorado in Boulder County, and I think it's somewhere in the $200 range for like the various court fees. It's still a bit of a hassle, and you have to go back. I had to go back a few times, and I was actually kind of pissed off at like the government was taking such an act, like meddling so much. I'm like, these are two people that are voluntarily separating. Why do we even have to ask their permission? So I felt a little bit sour about that. But yeah, it was $350, a few visits to the local courthouse. Not super hard to do. And even if you do hire a lawyer to do it, it should just be like a few extra $100 for that person's time. The key is you never want to use a lawyer to fight. It's ridiculous, especially in the types of asset levels that we're talking about with the average couple. They might just have a few $100,000 or $1 million or $2. Like lawyers are good for like if Apple has to fight Microsoft over the right to make something big, but like individual people should not be using lawyers to fight over their grocery money because that just makes the whole thing worse.
Oh, well, I clearly did it wrong. But my divorce, which I really appreciate that you wrote that article, Pete, even though I was like more than 10 years post-divorce, it was very meaningful to see how open you were about it and for you to talk about it with us today. At the time, I definitely felt a lot of anxiety. I was a little ashamed about it and things like that. But your article, I think, was very, very helpful to share some of the behind the scenes. And so I, for one, appreciate that. And like I said, my divorce was my wake up call. So my financial independence happened after I got divorced, but there is financial independence after divorce. I think that's kind of the summation here. And hearing it from you and writing it on a blog that's so popular where so many eyes will see that will help a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so. Because I want to take the shame and blame out of it, like a little bit, do my part. And also, the thing that's interesting is once you're divorced, like the important part is get out of the conflict stage as quickly as possible, be nice. And then it's just you. And guess what? You can run your financial life the way you want at that point, which means you can work really hard and earn and save and live however you like. And very quickly recover financially because you're no longer, like a lot of divorces even have a money component in them. So you're not subject to that other person's whims anymore. So yeah, I did a little bit of that just for my own, like kind of feeling like I wanted to be purposeful after that. So I made a point of saving some extra money after that and wanted so I could be extra comfortable and just feel like there. Now there was no downside, not even financial, to the divorce.
Yeah, that was awesome.
All right. There's a couple other articles we want to get to before our hour here. And you've gone a little bit potentially off the reservation from the FIlosophy, and you're a very green person, and you were very conflicted for a while about buying the Tesla. You just drove back from Arizona in the Tesla. People have had a lot to say about that in the community, and we've started to see Teslas popping up. Mr. 1500 and other folks with all the green electric vehicle approaches. Can you tell us your thought process behind and around? Because you had years of conflict over it before you finally made the leap.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, people, they were kind of egging me on a long time. And they just bought the Tesla, you deserve it. And it's silly because for me, there was no conflict. Like I just always think about, is there anything that I'm missing in my life that would actually make my life better? And if so, I consider, should I buy this thing? So I've always liked Tesla cars for a long time, but I chose not to buy one because I wasn't doing much driving at that stage of my life. Like my son wasn't really into road trips very much. My life is all local here. Like it's mostly bike based. And then last year, 2023, that changed and I had some interesting stuff going on elsewhere in Colorado, like some projects and some friends had mountain houses. And also my son was turning 18, which meant I'm going to have more free time to be away because we were on this one week parenting schedule until then. So I thought, hey, I think I actually have a use for a really nice car now. So I just bought it, no big deal. And the thing that's interesting is the reason I wrote about it is, first of all, because some people are being cheap with themselves with stuff they genuinely want. And even if they have a lot of savings more than they need. So that was one reason I wrote that article. It wasn't really about a Tesla specifically, or it wasn't really supposed to be about me. And the other thing is, yeah, I do have a secret mission with my blog, just try to get the world a little bit more sustainable. And despite all the silly controversy, electric cars are way less bad than gas cars, even though they're still bad. There's still a lot of metal and stuff getting mined to make these things. So if you're going to drive anyway, which I am, you might as well have an electric car. And I wanted to point out to my readers that Teslas are actually, like nowadays, they're the same price as a normal car. Like a Tesla Model Y, after the tax credits and stuff, was like $40,000. And people pay that much for a Subaru, which is a piece of junk compared to the Tesla Model Y. Like Tesla does everything way better. It's 4-wheel drive. You can sleep in the back. It's like everything that a Subaru wants to be, just better. So I wanted to get that out too, because I am like a technology guy and I like to be technology forward in my life. And then it's just part of my little brand is I like to share what gadgets and what inventions are useful, maybe if you haven't already gotten into them yourself.
Well, isn't FI greener? I mean, isn't being financially independent and appropriately frugal a greener way of life? You seem to espouse that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like that's the biggest reason I write my blog is because I want to appeal to high income people who have a lot of consumption power and give them an incentive to consume less. So yeah, the reward is you get to retire earlier and have more time with your kids and everything, but it's also a reward to everybody else because everything you buy comes with a footprint. So like every time you buy anything, you've left a giant smoking crater in the earth for what had to be mined and processed and burned to create that product. So I want people to still enjoy like the modern things of life, but just waste a little bit less. And so I encourage people to cut down on their waste, be more efficient, buy things that you only genuinely use, and especially like burning or not wasting fuel when you don't need it. So yeah, cleaner, greener, and money, those things all go together. And that's why it's worth it to me to put this information out there. Because otherwise, like, why do I care if other people retire early, right? Like, that's not really, like, I'd rather just be retired rather than putting the work into writing this blog and stuff. But my incentive is that if I can get thousands or millions of people to consume less natural resources, then that's better for everybody, right? Because we have less pollution and the world's going to flood more slowly. And it's just a bit of a way to do some good, I think.
Well, Bill, we got to get in asking Pete about the Arizona experiment. I listened to a podcast that you did, and it sounds amazing. Is it called the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, that's the name of the neighborhood that I met the last 4 months living in. And the podcast you're talking about is probably the big super group podcast that we had with Mr. 1500 and Paul Pan, Ed Carson and Brad from CUtFI.
Yeah, that was
and it was really, really fun that they all came to visit me in this neighborhood. And I was there as my first experiment in snowbird type situation, right? Where I left Colorado and went to a warm place for the winter.
Nice.
But it was also cool because the neighborhood I'm staying in bills itself as a car-free community. And I really like that, right? Because I think the US is way too car-focused, and anytime we can give people a way to walk around and bike around more in their life, and everyone has a more fun life. So I just checked out the project and it was nice. I mean, it's still in the early stages. That's my main caveat is like cul-de-sac is going to be a 1,000 person community with like all these plazas and parks and stuff like that. But it's going to take a couple of years to build out. They've only been building for about a year so far. So I still enjoyed it though, and like really, really nice. The people who work at cul-de-sac, the team is really the highlight so far because they're so committed and they're really trying to make it happen. They're being nice. Everyone, they're really encouraging if you live there, the residents to meet each other and do stuff together. So I enjoyed that aspect as well. But I just enjoyed Arizona as well, like just mountain biking and trying out new areas and learning about the big Phoenix metro area, which is way nicer than people think it is. Like Phoenix has a lot of really good nature right in the city.
Yeah.
So that was great. But what it taught me most is how much I love it here in Colorado. So like I came back to visit a few times throughout the course of the winter, and I reconnected with my friends and my house, which I really like. And I just realized, hey, I was taking this place for granted before, and now I appreciate how great it is. So now that I've moved back, I just got back last week, I'm kind of double committed or doubling down on Longmont and Colorado. And I'm happy about that too, because I appreciate my life even more.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to be trading in Longmont for Arizona. So yeah, you got nostalgic for it, huh? I mean, I'd love to visit that place in Arizona, a carless community. I think that would work so great for me because I drive about, it's only like 3 minutes, maybe a couple miles from where I live, this park that I love to go walking. Well, it's not pedestrian friendly, so I have to drive. But if I was in a community where I could get my walk in, because there's not cars everywhere, I don't want to be smelling fumes and all of that. I want to be somewhere nice and fresh air. So I think that's on my list of places to visit. What about you, Bill?
Well, it is too. And Brad Barrett was really at Economy talking about Waymo, because Waymo comes to this community as well. And I think he took it to the airport, and he was over the moon about Waymo.
Yeah.
Did you try that out too while you were there?
Yeah, it's really fun. So for people who don't know, it's just like Uber and Lyft, except there's no driver. So it's a project run by Google where they take these nice Jaguar electric cars and then they add a whole bunch of sensors and computer and stuff. And they've been working on it for like a decade. So at this point, it drives as well as a skilled human taxi driver, except the steering wheel is just like spinning by itself like a ghost in there. And you got control over the music. You typically sit in the back and it feels very futuristic. But they drive really well. And for people, like, of course, you can already have a person drive you around with Uber and Lyft, but there's a novelty to having a robot do it. And it's also kind of nice if you don't want to have to make small talk with the driver, or if you want to be able to have like a private conversation with your friends, or even just like party and play the music really loud. Waymo is a neat invention. And eventually these things are going to become a lot cheaper than human-driven cars because you don't have to pay an hourly worker. Of course, they'll have to find another job. That's a whole separate issue. But yeah, it's kind of a neat thing. And it does allow you to reduce the amount of human drivers in a city and reduce traffic and especially reduce parking lots, because with an autonomous car, it can be working all day for a lot of people instead of everybody owning their own car that sits there parked for 22 to 23 hours every single day, wasting space. And so cul-de-sac is really into alternatives to car lifestyle. So they give you an e-bike when you move in there. It's right on the light rail. They have a shared electric car fleet where you can just walk up and unlock it with your phone and use it for those times you do need a car. And then of course they encourage people to try Waymo as well. And there's like a nice Waymo pickup area in the neighborhood. And all that is really great because if you're going to get Americans to use cars less, you have to just ease us off of it. But we still need the car access, but maybe just take some of the worst parts of it out. And then that's a big step in the right direction.
Well, it sounds like you're a big proponent of FI 3.0, which is in many ways, as you espouse, the cure to global warming and reducing our carbon footprint and reversing the trends. So financial independence has so many benefits beyond the monetary. And I think your blog does an excellent job of telling us about all of them. So I applaud your lifestyle and approach to health, whether it be physical health, financial health, mental, social health. Your blog is so much more than what people might think it is, just looking at the simple, not the simple path to wealth, but the shockingly simple math. You take it so much beyond the math that I would encourage everybody to read it for those details, as opposed to just figuring out how to work the numbers to retire.
Wow. Well, yeah, thanks. I agree.
Yeah, and let me add this also, Pete. I just subscribed to your newsletter, so I really appreciate you doing that. So every Monday, I just got an email from you this morning from the newsletter. So that's another way to kind of get this, each article to you, or the ones that you deem to be most impactful. You get it right to your inbox, and we'll include a link to that, Pete, so that people could sign up. And I enjoy getting it every Monday versus continuing to go back to the blog, because something inevitably seems to interrupt me. But if I have it right there in my email, I usually will go ahead and read through the whole article. And you do updates and things like that. So I appreciate that you started that newsletter.
Yeah, that's hopefully other people understand that too, that are watching, listening right now. So you can read the blog if you're hardcore, if you want the whole 500 articles. If you just want the easy beginning, just look for the MMM camp, which, like you said, you'll see it in the show notes, or you can just look me up on Instagram, and like I have a pinned post that tells people how to join the boot camp too. It's just like any other newsletter. You type in your email address and click subscribe, and then you make sure you got the test email. But I'm kind of proud of that, because I kind of rewrote the best 50, it's really 55 articles, and made them up to date for like the 2020s. And now all of these people are on an automated sort of like self-guided path where regardless of when you sign up, you'll get the first email immediately, and then you'll just get one per week for a year. And I figure that's enough time for people to soak it in slowly and try some of these changes.
Yeah, I cleaned out a lot of junk in my email just to be able to make sure I got yours. So that takes priority in my email box.
It's a great way to parse down, like you say, 500 blogs. Where do you start? The decision fatigue, the overwhelm, and then it's hard to binge you anymore. You people used to, and maybe some people still do, and become the 500 reader. And maybe you should have a club for people that have binged through all 500. But I enjoy it as well. I subscribe to the email, and it helps me catch up on your top 50 points.
Yeah, and together they're about the length of a book. It's just that you're reading the book over the course of a year, which I think lets people soak it in a little bit more.
Well, that brings up the question,
Yeah,
Jackie, right?
I was about to say. Yeah.
Where is the book?
Yeah, we're dying to know.
Yeah, I don't have any plans to publish a book. I like the idea. What I wish I was is someone who has already published a book. Like I would have a book in my name, but I don't want to do the work just because it feels like a lot of homework. And I already did that to make the bootcamp email series. And of course, that series could just be kind of squished together into a book. Yeah. But I just don't really see the point, because there's other ways to get the information already. And yeah, I'm enjoying my free time too much to put the work into editing a book. I know there's ways, if you get a ghostwriter, there's some people who are really, really great ghostwriter/editor. And I would consider that, as long as I didn't have to do the work.
That's fair.
Yeah, outsourcing. Well, we're coming to the close of things here, and we respect your time, but we do have a few listener questions. We put it out to our Facebook group, and we said, we get to talk to Pete Adeney, Mr. Money Mustache. What do you want to know? So we had to pick a couple of questions that our listeners came up with. I'll read the first one. It's from Leanna. And my biggest question is, any regrets on where this path has taken him? Would he go slower or do it differently if he could do it all over again? What does he wish he'd have done sooner or waited a bit on? I can parse that down, but basically do you have any regrets, and would you do it differently?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Definitely no regrets on the retirement. To me, it happened as quickly as it needed to. Like I still worked a 10-year career, which is enough to have some nice experiences and some fun business trips and learning. Didn't need to work any longer, but I don't regret working as long as I did. And then next step was having a child. Definitely don't regret that. Super, super happy that we got that opportunity and that he is coming out nicely and he's a happy young man. And then the other part, I mean, you only get to live once, right? At least in my belief system. So I think retirement is a really, really good option to feel like you're getting the most out of life and to reduce regrets, because you can do so much more if you're not selling all your time to an employer. And that, the older I get, I'm 49 now, and I really appreciate all the different random crazy things that I've gotten to do because of not having a job. And it's all the time I've been able to spend with my son, like every day of his life, or pretty much. I've had a chance to just hang out and go for walks with him. And I've been the least absentee dad that I possibly could be. And that's something that when I die, I'm going to be really, really happy about that too. So yeah, it's like retirement. If you're purposeful with all the free time that results, it's the best way, I think, to live a full life and make sure you have fewer regrets. And I'm super grateful for that. And therefore, I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
You don't talk to people very often that you got it right from the beginning and not having any regrets. You must have read without reading it, Taking Stock by Jordan Grummett, because he's all about that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I did read that book and I enjoyed it. And I like his approach of interviewing people who are in the end of their lives so that we who are hopefully in the middle of our lives can still have a lot of runway to do meaningful stuff. But the thing is, like, even if everything's perfect, like on paper, my life is kind of like ridiculously good. Like sometimes I joke that I'm in man heaven because it's implausible that all this good stuff would be there, but I still have terrible days. I still have days when I just don't feel like doing anything and I feel like I'm wasting my time. And in a way, the opportunity makes it even worse. And I'm like, how could you not be happy even when you have so much good stuff in your life? But you have lots of time to work on that in the context of retirement, or read the right books and practice the right mental health and physical health things, and then get over the slump and learn more about yourself as a human. And so it's a way I wouldn't have the time to make these improvements if I was too busy or stressed in a job. So retirement's not a guarantee that everything's going to be perfect. It's just, and gives you more options to do your best to make the most of your life. But it's also a big responsibility because you're the one responsible for your own time. So it is possible to totally squander it, right? And just get into drugs and alcohol and TV watching and just not do anything. And for somebody who's going to do that, they would have been better off just staying at the job, because at least it would keep them out of the trouble of self-destruction. But I'm very self-driven. And I think that's the one reason I sought retirement so much, is like, there's no such thing as too much free time for me. Like I just have a huge list of things I want to do anyway. And it's just a matter of keeping myself on the go to do all these fun things.
Yeah, I'm figuring all that out too, Pete. Well, you said you were 49, and I can do math, but I'm like, you definitely don't look 49. I would say not a day over 35, but they have to watch the YouTube in order to see that. But we have one other question that we'd like to ask, and this one comes from Kyle. Kyle says, given his interest in the environment and an interest I hold as well, and now that you can get low-cost index funds that are socially responsible, has he thought about switching to those types of investments?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually wrote an article on that too, believe it or not. My blog's kind of like The Simpsons, where every subject has been covered in some point. So yeah, I wrote a blog called Socially Responsible Investing. Is it also more profitable? Or some title like that. And really what happens is you can buy funds that include certain companies and exclude other companies. Definitely not perfect. And it gets lots of flack in the news because sometimes there's some glaring examples where they make dumb choices. Like they might include Exxon, but not Tesla because of their metrics aren't very accurate. But in general, I think it's a good start. And if you take the average ESG fund, like there's one that Vanguard offers, and you carefully look at what companies you're investing in, it'll be a little bit better than full index. And it might help the environment a little bit, might not. It's worth a try, but it's not like a magic savings or anything, because there's other weird things about the mechanisms of investing in a company. And are you really hurting Exxon by not buying their shares? For example, I think a much bigger effect you can have is not buying the product as much, right? Like not buying as much gasoline is a big thing. And having a house that's more efficient and not having more house than you need. And that would be, if you care about the environment and consuming less meat, and especially beef, that's another example of a pretty big environmental impact you can have. So understanding what really wrecks the earth really helps. Like dig into those details and then take those actions, I think would be best. And I kind of push the electric car situation because everybody I know, like a lot of people still have gas cars and they drive a ton because when you're retired, you can just do that, right? Like I'm going to pop down to Texas for the eclipse and stuff like that. And it's very few people really care. So I'm thankful for this person who wrote the question because I'm glad to hear that there are some people who care and they're going to at least try to make some differences.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, the long answer.
No, that's okay. We've really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, thank you so much for taking the time. We've learned a lot. I mean, you're a philosopher. You're a FI philosopher, and you have a lot to educate us on that has nothing, like I said before, nothing to do with the mechanics of FI. That's actually probably your strength, is your philosophy. And I really appreciate that. We've gone through a lot of that today. Jackie, do you have any final questions for Pete? Or actually, the one we usually like to ask is there any specific questions for late starters or help we can give the late starters?
Yeah, that's our community. So any words of wisdom, Pete, we'd love to hear it.
Well, tricky one, because as you said, the mechanics are only a little bit part of it. So make sure you understand those, but maybe make sure that you're thinking about your personal health more. This is one of my side things I like to nag people about, is there are so many people who are good with money, but then they kind of just follow along in the standard American way of living, which is pretty bad for you. And that starts to catch up with you the older you get. So I would encourage you to find a fun and sustainable way to become a health nut. And I think everybody should be in the top 1% of their peer group for healthy habits, which usually results in healthy, results as well. And yeah, I see not a high enough percentage of FIRE people are really into that stuff. And it doesn't have to be a competition, and it shouldn't be about vanity, even though it will make your life better if you're in some areas as well. But just get into it, man. Because money and your brain are only part of it. Like your body kind of feeds into how your brain works and how much you're going to enjoy the money that you do earn. And we need to talk about that more in the FIRE community. I think there should be health should be one of the pillars. It's more of a big thing than it is.
Well, you speak our language because we actually had an episode, maybe I would encourage you to listen to it, by Dr. Bobby Dubois, that goes through health span and what can we do to improve our health span, because you may have a financial span, but if you can't live the natural length of your money, it's just not worth it.
Right. And the new Peter Attia book is pretty thorough on that too. It can be a bit of a thick listening experience or reading, but if you can even understand half of what's in that book, it will give people a lot of tools for better living, I think.
All right, Jackie, any final questions before we let Pete go today?
No, but this has been so amazing, Pete. Thank you so much for joining our Catching Up to FI community. You've dropped some really good information, and just to kind of get the behind the scenes straight from Pete was just awesome. So we loved having you, and you're welcome back anytime.
Right on. Thanks. Well, and thanks for the patience. I know it took a long time to set this up because I was traveling.
Well worth it.
So let's get the job done. And I'm glad that we have this episode in the bag.
Yeah, well, we're honored to have had you on the show. I think our audience will get real value out of this, and they're just curious. They're curious to see you. They're curious to meet you. And I feel very fortunate to have done so today. Thanks again, and you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. See you guys.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review so that our message can reach others.
While we are financial educators, and I'm a financial professional that loves to teach, our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
We'll see you next time on Catching Up to FI.